in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of King Herod, behold, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star at its rising, and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was greatly troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They said to him, "In Bethlehem of Judea. For thus it has been written through the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, since from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and ascertained from them the time of the star's appearance. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search diligently for the child. When you have found him, bring me word that I too may go to do him homage." After their audience with the king, they set out. And behold, the star that they had seen at its rising preceded them, until it came and stopped over the place where the child was. They were overjoyed at seeing the star, and on entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. They prostrated themselves and did him homage. Then they opened their treasures and offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed for their country by another way. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
There's a tenant in this building, on the second floor. Comes to work every day, but refuses to get in the elevator at the end of the hall. Have you ever been in the elevator at the end of the hall? Yeah, he won't get in. Even if he has to bring a lot of stuff upstairs, he'll take it down the hall, push it in the elevator, push the button, jump out the door, and walk upstairs and go get it upstairs. Because he's just terrified of this elevator. And if you've ever been on it, it is Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Sometimes it works just like any other elevator, and sometimes you think your life's over when you get in, the way it jerks and jumps and then stops and doesn't move until you push the button 3 times. It's a pretty bizarre elevator. But as great an elevator as it is, it's not my favorite elevator. My favorite elevator is in a building in Los Angeles, I think it's a 10, 15-story building, and it, like a lot of high-rises, it has multiple elevators, but this one elevator in particular has a little sign in it. And the sign says, "This elevator stops automatically on every floor on Saturdays." Does that sound strange? Oh, there's a very good reason for this. I'll give you a hint. The building is a hospital. Does that help? Give you another reason. It's the people that are most likely to want to use this elevator probably did not drive to the hospital to get there. Does that help?
Yes.
You can't reach the buttons.
No, it's not the reaching the buttons. In fact, the buttons are disabled. It stops automatically even if you push directly on the floor you want to go to. Got it?
Cedars-Sinai Hospital.
Cedars-Sinai Hospital. There's another good hint. Does that tell you something? Yes. Cedars-Sinai Hospital. A Jewish hospital. Now do you get it?
Yeah.
Devout, practicing Orthodox Jews believe that on the Sabbath, on Saturdays, that they religiously may not use machines, right? That they dishonor God by using a mechanical or device or a machine or something like that, but they believe that's a violation. So the only way to visit your sick friend in the hospital would have somebody else drive you there, first of all, and then you can't push the button in the elevator. But if the elevator automatically stops at every floor, that's okay. Now,
It's kind of a technicality.
well, of course it's a technicality, and of course that's silly, right? Because we said, is God really offended if you push an elevator button on Saturday? Of course God wouldn't really be offended. And even if we ask the people that religiously make sure they go in that elevator, do you think God would be offended if you actually rode the elevator and pushed the 9th floor button? Well, they'd say no. But God has asked me to do this. God has asked me to do this, and that's enough reason for me to do it. Because when I go through the inconvenience of trying to get around living in Los Angeles on Saturdays without driving my own car, without pushing my own buttons, it's not easy. But I do it because God has asked me to do it. And when I go to all this trouble, it forces me to remind myself of my need to adore and depend on God's love and mercy in my life. Even though the actions, the external actions, seem silly, it can have a great spiritual value for Jews. And, you know, the Jews, man, they've had a rough time. Location, 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 right? That's the first problem. They're in the wrong part of the world where any major army in the ancient world would have needed to control the land where it was, the Holy Land, was of great strategic importance. So if it wasn't the Babylonians, it was going to be the Greeks or the Romans, or somebody was going to have to control that area. So the Jews have this long history of warfare. Even today, of course, they don't have any friendly neighbors, right? Most of their neighbors would rather see the land of Israel, politically at least, disappear. Even when Jews have left Israel and gone elsewhere, like Germany, that didn't work out so good. Russia, very persecuted in Russia. They've just had a tough time everywhere. In this country, because we value religious freedom and don't discriminate on ethnicity and that sort of thing, of course many have done just fine. But when you come from a culture where you're constantly attacked, constantly persecuted, constantly discriminated against, when you're constantly on the defensive, how do you survive that? Well, you survive it by holding on to very tightly tradition, right? Even remember in the Fiddler, thank you. Fiddler on the Roof, they have the song about tradition, right? Because tradition, doing things, keeping the old ways, doing it the way we've always done it, has great psychological value for instilling security, hope for the future, continuation of your tribe, continuation of your family. And this phenomenon that we all experience where we don't like change. You ever notice that? Sometimes you just don't like change. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Well, as a culture, as a nation, they have to have this value as a survival mechanism. And so that's understandable. And that has its advantages, but it also has some terrible disadvantages too, because sometimes things do have to change. And even though the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know, sometimes you have to risk introducing yourself to the devil you don't know. So, if I were in marketing, I would, like so many people, say, what was God thinking when he chose to reveal himself in, of all places, ancient Israel, and to those people? I mean, really, If he was, he should have at least waited till Facebook came out and found a better way to introduce himself to the world. But, and I used to kind of think that way too. I thought, well, they have a point. Why do you take that time and place? But now, in my old age, I can see the wisdom in that. Because in a place where change was always threatened and therefore fought against the most, the change that needed to save the world came in the exact perfect place. And to make that change so emphatic and hard to ignore, Jesus, from this very birth, all the stories of Jesus are this constant, I know you're used to it this way, but you got to change kind of stories. His birth. Well, who did he first reveal himself as God to besides the few shepherds that were hanging around at the time? The Magi. These were non-Jews, foreigners, people that probably believed in multiple gods, people that believed in not voodoo, but witchcraft and astrology and bizarre things that were very contrary to what the monotheistic, the one God, supreme God culture of the Jews would believe. For them to be the first to recognize the Messiah would just be outrageous for a Jew to hear. And the second reading that we heard today talks about this. The Gentiles are just as much on board of the message of Jesus Christ as the Jews are, which is, again, a hard message for Jews to take. Remember, even St. Peter fought against this notion of abandoning Jewish law like circumcision and things like that, because he expected salvation to still be for the Jewish people. And this crazy notion that St. Paul came up with, that the gospel is meant for everyone. Well, again, looking back, we can see the incredible wisdom that God did and used to give the wake-up call that things need to be different. And so, in the season when we have to look at a baby and think of the baby as God, the baby that needs to be adored, this seemingly powerless creature has dominion over us all. That requires us to change. When this baby grows up and is willing to suffer to show what service means, we need to be willing to change the way we serve and are kind to others. When this baby who grows up to sacrifice his own body and blood to make sure that the gates of heaven are changed and opened, that salvation is made available for all, we need to change. And when this incredible radical notion that foreigners, people not like us, people with different thoughts and attitudes, are just as welcome here as anybody else, that means we need to change. Father Mike and I, Father Brian, we do lots of weddings. And probably the most, I don't know about you, but the most interesting weddings, I think, are the ones we do with rabbis. When we do weddings, we like to tell couples you have 3,211 options in your wedding ceremony. That's why we need to plan this thing carefully, because you have all these choices to make. But if you bring a rabbi into the picture, it goes from 3,211 to 6. Right? Because of their tradition and their beliefs. And there's nothing in the Jewish wedding tradition that would bother anything that would bother us. In fact, I know you like that chicken and wine thing. But there's all kinds of things we could do that would offend them. And so the options disappear because pretty much when you do a Jewish Catholic wedding, the rabbi runs the show in terms of saying how things need to go. The options are limited because, again, gosh, even the notion of them doing a Jewish Catholic wedding is pretty radical for most Jews. And to pull it off successfully, which we do, they work out pretty nicely, don't they? Very nicely. Still requires a willingness to look beyond, a willingness to change. And so, gosh, as the Christmas season starts to end, as this won't be here next week, right?
No, it will be.
Oh, it's got another.
Last week is.
Okay, so we got one more week. All right. But, you know, you're starting to put your Christmas stuff away, and we're starting to end this wonderful season we had. Let's try and recall that all of this requires us to do the same thing that the Jews had to do, to make heaven possible, to make God's full love revealed. Took some major letting go of the way we've always done it, openness to new traditions, to new ways of doing things. And for us, that means this constant call of, again, living out the rest of the year the same way we did December. Focusing on serving others, being kind to others, focus on family, all that stuff that we did so well in December that kind of gets really gray and faded by March. Our challenge to really change is to make that a 12-year celebration, if our hearts have been changed by the birth of our Savior. Let us now stand and proclaim faith.